politics of fear and hate are wrong. We love you and politics of compassion
But America,
and love are right.
we are not going back.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Raise Red Living Blue podcast. This is a very special episode. We've got the ladies from Read Freely, Alabama. So Angie and Krysti, we're going to start with Angie in terms of introduction. So tell us, a little bit about yourself and your position at Read Freely.
Yeah, I'm Angie Hayden. I live in Prattville, Alabama, just outside of Montgomery. Prattville's kind of where it all started with the book bannings recently. I am a co-founder of Read Freely, Alabama, and I also serve as the Director of Public Relations.
Awesome. Krysti?
I'm Krysti Shallenberger. I live in Coleman. I am the head of the Coleman chapter, and I also am the director of policy, so I oversee our policy strategy and our communication strategy as well.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate both of you ladies had to drive a little bit to get here. So I really appreciate y'all doing that. I love to do these in person when at all possible, because it's just a better product in the end. But this is a special episode also in that, Fairhope is another hot spot.
Yeah.
And that's my hometown. And it's funny, we were talking before we hit record about what kind of got me into this public arena of, fighting for the blue team. I've been in the closet since 2016. So I came out in 2016 just for a minute and then quickly went back in because I had people actively telling me if I didn't shut my mouth, I was going to lose business. They were not going to they didn't really care. It's like don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah.
They were like, fine, you can have all your liberal thoughts and everything and vote liberal, but we just don't want to hear about it. And if you want to be public with it, we're going to stop doing business with you. So, I'm not a man of many talents. So I was like, all right, I better just, I got this real estate thing down. Let me stick with that. And then after the 2024 election, started the podcast. But I've just gotten more and more emboldened. Like Instagram, TikTok. The big move was Facebook. But one of the things that motivated me was I shared a cartoon by J.D. Crowe. So, it was the vultures on the top of the Fairhope Library.
I know exactly the one you're talking about.
Oh, it went over real well.
Yeah, so I shared that. I just started sharing things. I had this big for me anyway. It was at that time, it was a Fairhope page. So it was just about life in Fairhope. And it had 25,000 followers. And so I just used it for real estate. And since I moved, I kept it active. I was making a little money from Meta, but I just started sharing these little political things, mainly about the library. And then, some other things followed after that. So yeah, I'm so glad you ladies are here. This is a big picture issue. Tell us, how did Read Freely come about and what exactly is the work that you ladies do?
Yeah, so I started in Prattville in 2023. The people from what is now Clean Up Alabama approached our city council and were demanding that the city council force the library board to pull, at the time it was 5 books. These books were just books that were inclusive, LGBTQ families, certainly nothing obscene.
Were they board books?
Yeah, some of them were board books. And ironically, one of them was a board book about consent titled Yes, No, A First Conversation About Consent. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about simple, innocent books about diverse families, and a book that actually equipped children to protect themselves against grooming. It's something that we hear a lot, groomers, that librarians are groomers, and we ourselves, I'm sure, have been called groomers. And I just think that it's interesting how they have stolen a word from people who have actually suffered trauma that way, and they have co-opted it to further their mission.
They've cheapened the language of grooming, which has been used to show how pastors, youth group leaders, people in power have groomed children to sexually abuse them, and accusing books that talk about those topics and talk about those power dynamics, and accuse librarians of grooming for just
doing their jobs.
Material that discusses those topics in age-appropriate ways. So
I just think it's very insulting to people who have actually been sexually assaulted and groomed.
It's quite gross, actually, I would say.
Yeah, that was the word that was floating around in my head.
Yeah, gross.
Well, when
So-
you say board books, just real quick, sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
But does that mean school board approved books?
No,
or-
just like actual board books, like for toddlers.
Oh.
One of them was the pronoun book, and that you're talking about a book that had one word on each page. He, him, she, and I believe at the end it says, "How do you know someone's pronouns? You ask." And that is what set it all off. That was the first book that set off the whole chain reaction that has spread to this statewide issue. I caught wind that they were going to city council. I can't even remember who told me. I wish I could remember so I could give them credit. So I went to city council to speak in response, and I spoke right after who's now the executive director of Clean Up Alabama. And I said, I'm Angie Hayden, and I'm here because I want you to understand that there's more than one kind of concerned parent, because I felt it was important that I speak up for families like mine. My daughter is gay, my oldest, and she grew up in that library. I tell people all the time, Krysti's probably sick of hearing it. My girls used to come out of that library literally with books stacked up to their nose. So that's their library as much as it is anyone else's. And the idea of these people sending messages to children like mine that they are somehow dirty or wrong or obscene just simply by being was not acceptable. And so I felt it was important to show up and push back against that. There were a handful of us that day there. A couple of us spoke, and then that kind of gained steam. It became a fight over the library's funding, which we won by one city council vote. And we thought, that's over. And then they moved to the state level. And so then we had the same problem, just on a much larger scale. And it has since really spread like a cancer all over the state of these people who are attacking librarians and sweet library boards for just having books that they don't like.
Who are these people?
Clean Up Alabama is a sister group to Moms for Liberty, if they're not the same organization by a different name. There is Eagle Forum. So you're talking about large national groups that have a lot of support and backing, posing as grassroots movements. They will tell you that they were just in the library and they stumbled across this book. I believe that they were sent to find the book. I think it's a little too convenient to believe that in all these towns, they're all just stumbling across the same small handful of books.
They all use the same website that Moms for Liberty has been traced back to a Moms for Liberty member. They're all using the same playbook that Moms for Liberty refined in 2021 and 2022. They're all using the same talking points. And Moms for Liberty, Eagle Forum was founded by Phyllis Schlafly, who made her name on being the anti-feminist, even though she benefited from feminism. And she went around, had a job, and told all women they should stay in the kitchens. Which is, in the 1970s, that was the height of the second wave feminism. You had the Equal Rights Amendment that she helped kill, and then she had a prominent role in the Reagan administration. But the playbook has been intensified, and they had a willing vehicle in Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida, where he has passed all of this legislation to ban books, and it started in school books. Alabama is unique in that it started in public school books, and that is because, one, I believe our schools already self-censor. I mean, we're a very conservative state. I think, at least in the community I live in, like, everyone knows everyone, and so people are pretty in tune to trying to balance multiple interests but be respectful to parents already. And then three, I would say the majority, if not all of these mothers, homeschool their children. And so the only access they would have to books that a lot of them probably can't afford to purchase would be through the public library. And so that was what they decided to attack in Alabama.
Angie, so real quick, I just want to touch on, you mentioned you had a gay daughter.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that really chaps my ass is that everything I see online about homosexuality, trans, it is a very, I think, overt, like, it's not even an insinuation. They're defining it as a choice, as some kind of a lifestyle choice, as something that is
As a perversion.
Yeah, it's perverted, but it's also a way to be cool and stand out and all this stuff. So we've got an attack on science as well.
Yeah.
Biology, things like that. It seems like maybe at some point people started to think, okay, well, being gay is not a choice, but being trans definitely is. But now it just seems like it's all, to your point, Krysti, we're just going back in time.
Yeah.
Right? We're going back in time where it's like all this stuff is perverted, and women being in the workplace is a bad thing. And
I'm already seeing calls on far-right Twitter calling for the repeal of the 19th Amendment. And I know for a fact there are certain people here that think that women shouldn't work because their husbands provide for them.
Right.
Leopards are eating faces right now.
well, and that's something like so I had a female troll, let's say, comment on a post I made last night on Facebook, and she was like, "I love our president." And I was like, what do you love most? Is it the misogyny, sexual predatory behavior, the pedophile protection? It's crazy to me that we're in this super conservative Christian red state, and yet y'all doesn't mean all.
Yeah.
Like, when I drive, so I work Smith Lake, and I drive all these county back roads, and I pass all these churches, and there's one in particular on 222 that used to have a sign up that said all are welcome, and I wanted to stop and get some content in front of that sign and be like, yeah, like, hey, can my friend Angie's gay daughter come with us on Sunday? And they'd be like, oh, hell no. The hypocrisy.
Yeah.
I'll let you answer, and then I have a few thoughts. Actually.
I'm sure you do. Let's have it.
I really do think that this is a response. It's a backlash to all that progress that has been made, because they're not only going after trans people, obviously are their first target because they're the most socially acceptable target. They're the easiest target, unfortunately. And gay people, but they've said from the beginning that they plan to go after books that they consider racially divisive. So really what they're seeking is that rollback. They want to pull us back in time to where only a certain type of person had a certain amount of rights and access. Yeah. And so that's really what this is about. And I think that's why it's so important, and why we feel so very strongly about it, is because it's about more than just the books, although that, the freedom to read would be enough. It's about the people who are represented by those books. One of our other co-founders, Sam Olson, has said from the very beginning that these books are a proxy for human beings. And what they are seeking to do is to define who is and who is not a socially acceptable person in public spaces.
And it's really the front lines for these culture wars, because if you see it, you just follow any of these groups, and I think they can't quite figure out what they hate more. And they slowly are progressing. A few of them are running for public office in Alabama, including the Moms for Liberty Madison chapter, Emily Jones. She believes that the SNAP program should be gutted. I grew up in rural Alabama. A lot of my friends were on SNAP and on these programs for various reasons. And so that's kind of the mentality there. But I have a few thoughts about the woman's comment, because I grew up homeschooled and in a very conservative, ultra conservative.
Oh shoot, that reminds me. So after this, we got to get to your story.
And I'm more than happy to dig down into it. But one of the things, I was somewhere at a conference recently, and I was talking to this older gentleman, and he loved Trump, said, I think what he's doing is great. But then we started talking about privacy laws and AI. And he said something that stuck with me when we talked about the Patriot Act, and then how Obama never rolled it back. And, really the cult of personalities that can surround politicians sometimes supersede like common sense and common decency. And I don't think that there is a political party that has not been immune to that. But one of the things he and I both said about the growing surveillance state in America and the concerns we had, because he lived abroad and was definitely surveilled, where there wasn't the Constitution and other fairly basic rights to hold them back. He and I said, you might disagree on some things, whether or not you have something to hide, but you can agree on the principle of the thing. And what I have found in my conversations with people, and I live in a very conservative community, is we can disagree on certain things, but we can agree on the principle of the things. The principle of parental rights encompasses everyone. The principle of taxpayers. And I think, in my experience, that has not been applied to certain people who have taken power in certain parties, specifically the Alabama GOP chair. But I'm very confident when I say, I think right now both political parties are going through this massive reckoning internally and externally, where they're trying to go back to the principle of what America was founded on. And I can say in my conversations with people who are on the complete end of the spectrum politically of me, we agree on certain principles together. And I think what makes this fight in particular so powerful and so poignant is that we have been able to say, like, okay, I understand you homeschooling parent might have concerns about these books because that doesn't fit your ideological worldview in these age-appropriate sections. But if we apply the same arguments in a blue county that they decide your viewpoints are not appropriate for children's section, would you agree with that? And I would guarantee they will say no. And I think we can come to an agreement to say, like, we can't control that. And there are so many commonalities that we can agree on. The literacy rate in Alabama, the rise of technology that will displace written word, and we can agree on these and apply and understand we need to do better educating our children with critical thinking, with opposing viewpoints instead of censoring them, with raising our kids to be virtuous and good and kind and empathetic, and try to figure out how do you navigate a complex system of laws to help ensure that we have order, but also ensure equal rights and civil rights. And like I said, different ways of getting there, but when I've talked to people on the ground, I think we can agree on principle in a lot of ways. But getting that up to the top, I think, is taking a lot of groundwork.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think that we're kind of in a unique position in that what the work that we're doing really has appeal across the entire political spectrum. Progressives, conservatives, true conservatives are supposed to believe in very limited government and individual freedoms, not the state GOP chair deciding what is appropriate for you and your family based on his own private belief system. So I think that there's so much opportunity, like you were saying, coming together and find that common ground with both progressives and true conservatives who really have best interests of the children and libraries in mind rather than just furthering a political agenda.
Hey, fellow Blue Dots, we would love for you to connect with us on social media. We're on Instagram and TikTok at Raised Red Living Blue. Okay, back to the episode.
So there's this woman, my mom knows her from me as the Twitter asshole. She is a very prominent, I would consider her a grifter. She homeschools her family. She's pretty loud and opinionated. She lives in Maryland in Montgomery County, which is one of the bluest parts of the country. She has rhetoric that even my mother, who's very conservative, would just find alarming and hateful. And one of the things she tweeted recently was that a book dealing with basically the October 7th massacre was not going to be purchased. Someone requested a book dealing with that was, I think, pro-Israel, to be purchased by the Montgomery County Library, and the person just said no, gave no reason. So she tweeted about it, how wrong this was. I did not respond to her on that, but she is very much with Moms for Liberty. She helped recruit Muslims to be part of the lawsuit that basically gave the religious families the ability to opt out of curriculum dealing with LGBTQ, and then in the same breath tweeted that all Palestinians should be nuked. And the only reason they shouldn't be is because it would hurt Israelis. So this is someone who is kind of inherently contradictory in terms of how she views things. And she tweeted that. And I'm like, well, according to Moms for Liberty and a lot of the law firms, lawyers, they're promoting this idea of government speech. They're saying libraries can't contain everything. Government speech is a legal idea that libraries are inherently mouthpieces of the government and that you can't have every book that would contradict the mouthpiece of the government. So if you're talking about a blue county, of which she is definitely in the minority, refusing to purchase a book for an adult, I believe it's an adult book, because of viewpoint, does she not deserve the same rights to access information like we do in the public library?
Yeah.
And isn't that what Montgomery County doing? I don't know what the reason is, but in my experience, librarians have always been like, okay, we don't have the budget for this right now, but they do try to make an attempt to purchase those books because that's what my mom did. Would not the same arguments we're making now for her right to access information as an adult, she's a taxpayer, would not that apply to us as the minority party or the so-called minority voice in Alabama? Does not those rights protect her in a blue county as much as they protect me in a red county?
It's interesting that she doesn't make that connection, that she's having her right to access information infringed upon while she willingly infringes on the rights of others to access information.
It every single day. It's like
And to be clear, we're very much on her right to access.
Yes.
Yes.
I want to make that very clear for everyone. This isn't a matter of one group wanting to remove these books and the other group wanting to censor these books. We think that all viewpoints should be available in the library. The library is supposed to be kind of, a marketplace of ideas. You go in, you choose what you like, what fits your needs at that moment, what you're researching, what you find entertaining. You get to go in and choose that out of a myriad of books. And so that includes books that I disagree with. It includes books that you disagree with.
Including in the children's section. There's definitely some religious books in there that I would be very hesitant about wanting my kids to read, but some other family might want it. Why should my hesitation impact their right to it?
Yeah, that's why I find it so interesting that they have also co-opted parental rights, because they don't really want parental rights. They want the right to parent your child.
Yeah.
They don't really want everyone to have equal parental rights. They want very strict control over what children are permitted by default to access.
Yeah, it's like free speech, but it just seems like, they're for the Constitution unless it allows people to do these.
Well, it's like the quote, if you don't want freedom for everyone, you don't actually want freedom. You want, you want dominance, really. You want privilege. If you don't want freedom to access information for everyone, then you don't really want freedom to access information. You only want privilege for yourself, and everyone else is free to be oppressed, and that doesn't bother you. And I just find that so interesting that that's coming right now mostly from, what I have always been told all my life are people who believe in small government and individual rights. It's just so strange to me.
It really is. I mean, I think that's the perfect word, strange. It's baffling.
It leaves you with the conclusion, the only conclusion, is that they never really meant it. They only meant it so long as they could control everything.
I think we underestimate the lust for power.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that in so many. I mean, first of all, the motivations of the people right now leading this charge to ban books, they are very we're not banning books, you can purchase them off the internet. Okay. Person in Montgomery, they're not banning books in your library. You can purchase it off the internet. That argument does not go over well. We're just removing these books to the adult section. Okay, let's move all books that you approve of dealing with let's move the Left Behind series for kids into the adult section because they deal with violence, sexually explicit material. I'm pretty sure it mentions sex once or twice. Let's move those books into the adult section. Let's treat our teenagers who, there's one of the leading book banners in the legislature, Susan DeBose, is trying to push a bill to reduce protections for kids to do child labor so that businesses can use children, 14-year-olds, to fill the gaps. If you expect them to be able to handle that without the protections to make sure they go to school, if you expect them to be able to carry a child when they're 12, 13, 14, if you expect them to know how to handle a car at 16, if you expect them to be able to handle poverty, violence, sexual assault, sexual abuse, addiction, divorce, all of these things that impact kids on a daily basis, but they cannot be expected to read about it in their own age-appropriate section.
It's wild.
Make it make sense for me.
Yeah, that you would expect a child to carry a baby to term and become a parent, but she's now no longer allowed to access a book on her own body and sex education in her public library.
A teenage mother would have to get her parent to approve a card so that she can access books to do what? Learn about child rearing in the adult section. That's what they want in the library, to restrict all minor cards. That is the logic that is driving this.
Background for your audience, the APLS board, which has been stacked, and the chair is the ALGOP chair, John Wall. They have decided that any book that mentions sex, nudity, is by definition sexually explicit and inappropriate for minors. So,
Which is not the legal definition.
Right. In case you all missed it, that means that they have now taken any and all sex education materials away from teenagers in a state where teen pregnancy and STDs are some of the highest in the nation.
They also are requiring more libraries to spend our taxpayer dollars to implement structure of cards that would essentially restrict kids' access, physical access to access books in the adult section or in. So if you have a precocious reader, and my brothers and sisters and I were all precocious readers. We were out of the young adult section by the time we were 12, 13 years old. Or even access books for school, like
most of your research papers, your homework.
Most of your classic reading, they're not shelved in the young adult section. You're not going to find Pride and Prejudice in the young adult section. You're not going to find Jane Eyre in the young adult section. And so they're making it harder and then essentially saying like, because I remember all these saying, we're coddling our kids too much. They should be able to handle this. And then you take away books, which to me is less harmful than TV and whatever they can access on the internet, which is a Wild West.
Well, that's what I was just saying. I mean, I don't know if y'all know this, but you can go on Instagram, TikTok, I think maybe X, formerly known as Twitter, has become the worst. I mean, there's actual porn.
Yeah,
on
there
X.
is.
It's very much in the public eye. And then as a father of a 15-year-old who really started, I don't know exactly what age, but I mean, to think that they don't know about sex early on. I mean, the things they're talking about and they're aware of.
And they have questions. And again, I think that it's just so ironic to me that our opposition takes up this mantle of protecting the children.
They haven't even protected their own kids.
No, they have taken
they all have history of addiction and divorce and some pretty hard stuff. I mean, word does get out. They all have those histories in their own families. Their own kids aren't protected from those stories.
And it's unfortunate that, you know, books about sex education, books for children, the book I referenced earlier, Yes, No, A First Conversation on Consent, which, you know, teaches very young children, you know, that they have a right to have boundaries around their body and teaches them proper names for their body parts. Those materials make it less likely that a child will be a victim of sexual abuse. And these people who are parroting protect the children are taking those away. They want to keep teenagers completely ignorant of sex education, I suppose, until they leave for college.
Well, not even then, because if the age of consent is 19, those kids are in college and they're not allowed to like, once they're in college, my mother was basically giving me free reign by the time I was 17, 18 over what I read and everything like that. One, she had instilled values and boundaries and she expected me to obey them. And if I disobeyed, there was consequences. Have we forgotten that?
Yeah.
Two, you are essentially expected to make major decisions in your late teens. You're expected to figure out a career, a college, if you're going to college. If not college, what are you going to do for a job where you're not going to be working with 16, 17, you're working with adults. And I think the idea of consent around the body, every time we've heard, it was like, well, children cannot legally consent. No, they can't. But the idea is not to tell them you can consent. The idea is to teach them what consent is at a young age. And I want to use my mom as an example. She and I butt heads over politics like something fierce. But I think she's an incredibly good example of common sense parenting with consent and having hard conversations of sex. When I read something in a book, like a Bill Clinton autobiography, or actually a biography, which led to a hysterical conversation about the differences of foam sex and phone sex that she had to talk to, I think I was 13 at the time. My little sister was 11. My little sister brought this up recently. It's just funny. But she never flinched from that. She answered the questions, and she also always taught us no person has the right to touch you without you saying yes. And the reason why is I was born in Virginia, Stafford, which is a very military town. My family is military. And we had a bunch of we had two sisters. We had a series of kidnappings, the Lisk sisters and Sophia Silva, and they were kidnapped off the front porch, raped, and their bodies were found in a river. And that traumatized the entire community. And my mom was like, and this was in the era of latchkey kids, in the 90s. And my mom was like, if you feel funny around somebody, if you do this, basic, I don't even think in her mind she was thinking, I'm teaching my children of consent. All she was thinking of, I cannot be with my children 24/7.
She's giving you the tools to protect yourself.
Exactly. And I know you did that with your daughters.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I want them, I think that maybe what some people don't understand, and maybe when, especially when we see the tactic of, some of these Moms for Liberty extremists taking a book from the young adult section and reading a paragraph where it has some language about sex, and they want to strip that from libraries. I think maybe what people who hear that and are like, wait a minute, maybe they have a point. What they might be missing is that the more secrecy and shame that you build around the idea of bodies and sex, the easier that you make it for your child to become a victim, because that secrecy and that shame makes it incredibly easy for predators to single out your child, because they know that secrecy and that shame will serve that predator very well. I think that every parent has a right to shield their children from that information if they choose. I think it's unwise. I think it's dangerous. I think they're doing their child a disservice. But they have a right to do it for their family and for their household, not everyone's.
Big, huge distinction there. But I think, too, when you make things taboo, everything that I was told when I was younger I didn't need to know about, or, hey, we're having adult conversations here, I was I got to listen
Yeah,
in on
it
this.
just makes you want to know more.
Yeah, it just heightens your curiosity level. And so we're going to restrict the avenues by which they can gain this information. So, maybe they'll seek it online, or
maybe they get curious and seek it out in ways that actually endanger them.
Maybe they'll find it out in the back seat of a car.
Yeah.
Because I will tell you, the book in the library is not going to assault your child. The person who knows that your child feels very shameful and believes that they can't speak of these things, that's who's assaulting your child. The book actually gives your kid the tools that they need to protect themselves. We had very early on a member in our Prattville chapter who stood up at a library board meeting and said, she had suffered some terrible abuse as a young girl, and she said, if I had had these books, it would have saved me from years of horror. And the answer from one of the Clean Up Alabama members was to point at her in front of everyone and shout, "You are grooming children the way you were groomed."
That's disgusting.
Hey, fellow Blue Dots, don't forget you can find all of our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Please hit that subscribe button, and we would love a review. Okay, now back to the episode.
The right-wing media ecosystem is really trying to make empathy and anything dealing with empathy in schools and in churches and in public life like toxic, because it allows for lawlessness, they say. Empathy is the one thing that keeps me from expressing foul thoughts about people I disagree with who are grieving. Because the minute I feel a thought like that coming in, immediately and another thought comes in being like, oh, for the grace of God, go you. Oh, they're going through a hard time. Why are you feeling rejoicing over this when that could be anyone, and they deserve the same care that you deserve if you were going through that. That's the thing that keeps us human. And these books, like any books dealing with race and LGBTQ and trans issues, dealing with the realities of conversion therapy, which I know people here have sent their kids to, and it's now coming to light how abusive that is. Some pull their kids out of public school for being gay in Alabama, or coming out. Like, I know of one story of that, to homeschool them and isolate them for that, and I can't speak to all of that creates an ecosystem where you promote more divisiveness, where you promote hate and hurt and wounded feelings.
I think that, reading books about people who are different from you does foster empathy. It teaches children empathy. And I am telling you that is exactly why they don't want them to have access to those books, because they do not want to raise a generation of people who are empathetic to people that they see as less than, who do not deserve the same rights that they have, who do not deserve the same equal footing in society as they have, who maybe their stories reflect poorly on their own demographic. They don't want that. They want no empathy for those people so that they can retain their position of privilege and power.
So there's some dots that people, if they wanted to start paying attention, could connect.
Yes.
For instance, I feel like Turning Point USA is going after the youth so they can start grooming them into like Christian nationalists who have these same beliefs and ideologies. But one thing that Charlie Kirk was big about, preached a lot about, was that, he was totally against empathy, right? He didn't believe in it.
Yeah.
And just listen to you talk, it's like you're starting to connect these dots of it's all the way at the top, all the way down. So you got like the White House all the way down to like the Fairhope Library, where there are these common denominators that exist.
Empathy is what's keeping me holding forth grief for a widow and two very young children who saw their father murdered in the most brutal way. And that video is on social media and has been passed around for entertainment.
It's
That
so
empathy.
heartbreaking to me that those children will grow up with that video floating around in the world. And I have the most empathy for those children. And I find it interesting that often on the other side, when similar things have happened to people on the left, there seems to be that lack of empathy. And so I think that I wish that those who are demanding an abundance of empathy were just capable of giving it in return. I think that we would all be better for it if everyone could find a little bit more of that.
Well, these organizations are heavily rooted in Christianity.
Yeah, I would say a very, very specific kind of Christianity, though, because I will say I'm a good Methodist girl myself sometimes, and and I think
Until you're in traffic.
right,
Yeah, exactly.
then things change, and then I think that I would say the majority of Read Freely members consider themselves to be Christian, and so this sect of far right extreme evangelical Christianity.
It's simply a lust for power.
Yeah, it's truly, they're using that to gain power, but they're also trying to take that mantle of Christianity and God away from all of the other Christians that do have that desire for empathy for people who are different than them. We have pastors who have spoken up for us at the APLS board meetings. We have churches who are very supportive of our work. It's unfortunate, and I keep waiting for that moment when the actual church, the people who follow the actual teachings of Jesus Christ, stand up and say, we will not allow you to take our God and our beliefs and our religion and use it as a weapon against people.
Well, they're doing what the Catholic Church did. The Catholic Church grew out of the Roman Church, which was considered a cult during the Roman era. Sorry, I will nerd out like this. I grew love theology, love books, but it was really such a reversal of this me culture, and it taught a radical idea of first shall be last. The rich are poor because they do not know what actual riches are. The poor shall be first. We will serve the broken, the woman, those...
The meek shall inherit the earth.
Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. I mean, the Beatitudes are just a wonderful... Strangely enough, you hear about the Ten Commandments being posted in, which nobody seems to follow, but you don't hear about the Beatitudes being posted. Now, I'm not a fan of imposing your religion on others via school systems, but I do think the Beatitudes should be held up as just this remarkable way of teaching you humility and virtue. But on the flip side of that, I would contest that the church has always been corrupted and has always sought power. But there always has been a few people who worked against that. And that's where we've grown into different sects, because people are like, well, I don't like this. The Puritans, grew from being pretty religious fanatics who banned Christmas to having set in place some of our richest, most democratic ideals that framed the Constitution in Rhode Island. That was, I can see his name, but in the 1600s, he was banished to Rhode Island simply because he believed that there should be separation of church and state because political power corrupts the church ideals. And in our World War II, the majority of Christians stayed silent as their neighbors were murdered in concentration camps. It was brave people like Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Corrie ten Boom and so many others who sacrificed everything they had and were sent to those concentration camps or executed themselves for practicing the ideals of the church. But the majority of people who called themselves Christians and who called themselves fell for more political power. And I think that that has always been the history of the church. And right now what we're seeing in this certain sect of Christianity is merely a copying of what they have condemned in the Catholic Church and in other churches. They have become enthralled with worldly pleasures of power. And we're seeing that lust in blog sites where they are wielding the Bible like a chain and padlock on people. We're seeing them declare, if it was up to me, almost every book that's Hannah Man reads of Cleanup Alabama would be removed from the library. 1819 News, we have video of this. CEO Brian Dawson was like, burn the books, burn everything. You know, he's really on this fire and brimstone, which has never been, I think, the intent of what Christ has taught us to be.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that some of our most consistent supporters who've shown up at the APLS meeting are Quakers. Quakers are really out there speaking up for the least of these. And
they were the leaders of the white leaders of the abolition movement to end slavery.
Yeah. And so I'm always, whenever the subject of Christianity comes up in regards to this, I think it's always so important to make sure that we're not condemning the whole of Christianity, because I truly believe, and I think that I've found this to be true across the board, whether you're talking about the spectrum of your belief system or the political spectrum, the majority are on the right side of this. They are with us with this. And that includes the church, that includes Christian people, because they understand, one, that LGBTQ people and people of color are their brothers and sisters and children of God. And they also understand that in order for this country to function properly, we have to make sure that everyone has the freedom to live their lives as they choose and retain the same rights that they have. And I think that somewhere along the line, the right has lost that central message of individual freedom, small government, stay out of my business. And they've allowed this small minority of extremists to manipulate them and fool them and scare them and lead them by the nose into a reality where they're willing to accept the government dictating things about their lives that I don't think that they would have accepted.
And I think the left is rediscovering the values of individual freedoms and the right to hold ideas not because you agree with them, but because they must be spoken. Because you have to, otherwise you can have grifters. And I think a lot of it is grifters who made money being like, I was the only conservative off Harvard and look at this. And like that, there's a lot of money in think tanks and conservative think tanks for that type of grifting. And I think now you're seeing a lot of your more traditional higher education realizing, you know, ideas are controversial for a reason. But if you fail to have that conversation about them, then they fester. And then people can make money and say like, look, they're not letting you talk about it. Put me in power. And that person doesn't have pure motives and uses it. And I think there's kind of a recalibration going on. It's not helping with social media and the bot farms.
Right.
I think that a lot of it is just, I wish that maybe people would take a beat when they hear about a book that makes them feel a little something, like why would we have that? Take a beat and recognize that someone is manipulating you and they are pushing your fear button.
They're making money off you.
Yeah, and they're manipulating your fear. You see these groups come into a meeting, whether it's the library board meeting or the city council or at the state house, and they will take a young adult novel and they will read a sentence or two out of context. And people hear that out of context bit, and it just kind of ignites a little bit of fear and anger. And then once they've accomplished that, once they've manipulated your fear, they can really go to work on your rights. And that's what they're currently doing. They have made people irrationally afraid of a few words on a page. And now they are going to start coming into your library and dictating what you and your family can read. And today, it might be a book that you're okay with letting go.
Tomorrow might not be.
Hey, fellow Blue Dots. You can find all our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. If you like what we're doing here at Raised Red Living Blue, hit that subscribe button and leave a review. Connect with us on social media via Instagram and TikTok. Keep up the fight. We will see y'all next week.
Politics of fear and hate are wrong. We love you and politics of
But America,
and love are right.
we are not going back.